Hey, how's it going? So, I've been thinking for a while about the traveling I do and what perspective I've gained with it. And I've seen a lot of positive, amazing things. I've seen a lot of negative and terrible things. But in general, with the people that I've met in the situations I've come across, I've always noticed a generally positive perspective, despite if people are in a good or a bad situation. I'm over here in San Diego right now, and I feel like when I'm in more developed countries, people have a generally negative connotation about what's going on in the world. That things are always getting worse. Yeah, there might be blips here and there that things are good, but it's generally trending in a worse direction. And I know that's not true after everything I've seen, but that's not enough to change anyone's mind. The thing is that there's this misconception that stuff does get worse. It always has been, and especially when you watch the news, it just looks that way. And there's a really amazing statistician called Hans Rosling, and unfortunately he passed away a couple years back. But he did a lot of work involving bringing together statistics to actually prove these misconceptions wrong and show that the world is objectively getting better. And as I've been growing out my beard, I realized that one thing, if I'm just going to touch on one subject, it's going to be the thing that he did with extreme poverty and how it's been dropping throughout the years. And I'm going to show that with this razor and using my beard as an infographic to where we were and where we are now with extreme poverty. So another thing that I know that people will immediately have an issue with is, what is the definition of extreme poverty? So let me grab a laptop and let's just Google it. Here we go. Extreme poverty. What do we have as a definition that people will understand? This is the United Nations definition. Extreme poverty, absolute poverty, destitution, or penury was originally defined by the United Nations in 1995 as a condition characterized by the severe deprivation of basic human needs, including food, safe drinking water, sanitation facilities, health, shelter, education, and information. It depends not only on the income, but also on the access to services. So that's important. Actually, I'm gonna fix it a little bit. That's important because a lot of people will be like, oh, it's only measured on $1 per day thing or $1.50, whatever. And that doesn't measure psychological distress or something like that. Well, I will say right now, if someone has everything they need and they're in psychological distress, it is a terrible thing. It is really bad, especially if it drives someone to contemplate their own existence in a negative connotation. But I will say that if someone does not have basic food, safe drinking water, sanitation facilities, health, shelter, and no education, I don't think that they would be smitten and happy and enjoying life. And that means that what is happening to these people that are in extreme poverty is very psychologically terrible. It's just that a lot of people that I know and you know have never experienced an entire lifetime deprived of these things. So they've measured the international poverty line in 2018 as $1.90 a day, and which is equivalent to $2.12 in 2018, set by the World Bank. But I'm using that just as this measures all of those statistics, especially with Hans Rosling. So this is the message that he had, and I'm going to put the link to this video. It's called "Don't Panic, End Poverty," and he has a lot of these "Don't Panic" videos, but this one in particular I wanted to start with, and this is what he says.
A war that seems to have no end. An enemy that feels unbeatable. Extreme poverty.
More than half the people in the world are living in conditions approaching misery.
we've had endless campaigning.
They are trapped in the prison of poverty.
So right there, there have been many times where people have said, you know, over half the world is in extreme poverty, which was at one point true. So using this in my beard, I'm going to now get this a little bit closer maybe, what has been happening over time. So, number one, it's not easy, I'm quoting Hans Rosling here. He says, it's not easy to measure extreme poverty, but there is an uncertainty, but there is no doubt that this trend is indeed going down. That being said, we can start off 200 years ago, and we'll use that statistic for now because things were even worse before then. This is before the Industrial Revolution, which a lot of books, including Sapiens, says had to do with a degradation in the quality of life of people. So this is even before then, and extreme poverty in 1800 was at 85%. So I'm going to keep 85% of my beard. That looks like about 85%. Now, this is 50 years later. 50 years, extreme poverty dropped by only 5%. So from 1800, it was at 85%. In 1850, it was at 80%. So I'm gonna keep 80% of my beard here. Great. No, this still doesn't look too bad. Okay, 50 years later, in 1900, poverty was at 70% of the entire population. 70% was in extreme poverty. So I'm gonna hold on to 70% of my beard here. And it gets pretty rough down there. I think there was a bird nesting in here a few days ago. All right, I'll say that's about 70%. Don't worry, got a towel down here covering this. I'm gonna hide this somewhere. Now, 50 years after that, so now we're gonna go 1800, 85%, 1850, 80%, 1900 was 70%. By 1950, that's 150 years later, extreme poverty was at 55%. All right, and by 1970, that was the first time in human history that extreme poverty hit 50%. So half the world was above extreme poverty and had access to those things that we talked about earlier, healthcare, basic food, water, all those things. Doesn't mean that everybody was smitten. There's still a lot of terrible things going on, but it means that they got past that extreme level. By 1990, it was 35%. So I'll hold on to 35% of this. Really gonna have to tan after this. Maybe I'll get a little of this. I definitely can't do this video over again. It's gonna be one shot right here. Okay, I'm gonna say, right there, over there, okay. That's about 35%. Now, when he was still alive, he did a video in 2015, and in 2015, poverty dropped all the way to 12%. That's amazing. And the United Nations had a goal of having poverty. So it went from 35, and it went more than half, from 35% to 12% of the world. And that has nothing to do with inflation. This is all adjusted for inflation. This has to do directly with what people have access to and their quality of life. These physical, objectifiable things in life. Because I know that that's gonna be a thing that's gonna be recurring as people say, like, well, what about happiness? People aren't happy. Happiness is subjective. It's really hard to measure, even more so than extreme poverty. But for people to have these very basic things, That's the most important part, and that's the lesson that I'm showing here. Like, what we think the outside world is and what's really happening is hands down a completely different thing. So I'm gonna drop down to 12% here. Maybe here. Oh man, this is gonna look weird. Let's leave this face like that. Wow. This is, yeah, I should just go on like this from now on. Great look. Just curl the mustache over my lip. So, unfortunately, Hans Rosling passed away, and that's actually why I would love to work with the Gapminder Association and continue their efforts here. Through the right actions with economic growth and targeted aid, we can end extreme poverty. That was his goal always. He said that it's possible to do within 15 years, and that was in 2015. So he believes it's possible to end it by 2030. Today, in 2019, it's gone now from 12% all the way down to 7.7%. So now I'm gonna get rid of why does this side look so weird? All right, you know what, screw it. That's still more than 7%. I know what everyone's thinking. Charlie Chaplin, right? There. So this is today. People might not think this, but poverty right now has gone from 85% down to 7.7% today. And it's gonna drop further. 2030, what they have as the United Nations is, well, I'll show you this right now, this statistic. Right now, we are at 2019. And in 2019, it shows the number to be 592 million people around the world, specifically Africa, and most of the equatorial areas of the world, as being in extreme poverty. That's terrible. 600 million people, that's almost twice the population of the United States. But by 2030, the likelihood is there that that number will go from 5%, according to this, or according to Hans Rosling, we can eradicate it in 10 years. I don't think it'll ever be 100% eradicated, but I think that we can get to 99% in 10 years with what he says. The actions together with economic growth and targeted aid can end extreme poverty. And I don't have to wear this crazy mustache then. And this is his words right here.
It's not easy to measure extreme poverty. There is an uncertainty, but there is no doubt that this trend is fast going down and that the last goal was indeed achieved. However,
and he also mentions this as his concluding argument.
ending extreme poverty won't end the problems of the world. But in comparison with other huge problems like climate change and war, this one to me seems easy. So goal 1.1, let's do it.
And that's what I want to do. I want to help Gapminder and other people. At least step one for me is I want to get people to understand that there is this misinformation out there. It's more than just a misinformation. It's a preconceived idea that things are way worse than they really are. And that's not true. There's a lot of bad things, but this can be changed, and it is changing. And I think that that's something that will change happiness for people. If they realize that the world is getting better, the happiness level and other things that keep people in a generally good mood, or at least a productive one, will change. So hopefully my weird new cue ball look makes sense for what I just tried to prove. I think I missed a few hairs. All right, well, until next time, see you later, San Diego. And in the words of Ron Burgundy, well, no, I don't want to say go fuck yourself.